What is up? Welcome back to the Vanflip episode, Lambgoat's very own podcast. You know me, I'm Lurk. I am sitting with, via the internet, if you're not watching the video, I am sitting with oh, sorry, I just got an email. I got distracted. It was from Tim, the guy who's setting all this up, which you probably just heard the ding in it.
I got that email too.
Yeah. I'm with Steven of the Chelsea Grin. Not the Chelsea Grin, Chelsea Grin. I was going to try to pronounce your last name, Steven, but I'm just going to let that roll and I'm going to let you do it because I don't want to butcher it too bad.
Steven Rutishauser, baby.
Rutishauser. Yeah, that would have rolled right off the tongue. Either way, yeah, we won't reply to Tim because obviously we situated everything. You and I are on the call. It's,
Good.
we're here now. So, Steven, it's a Friday. What's going on, man? What you been up to?
A whole bunch of just getting ready to drop a record, which happened today. So
Mm-hmm.
today's been a lot of scouring the internet, looking for anybody who's being mean to me.
Is
Just
that
kidding.
hard? Is that hard to do?
The response has been super positive, so I'm grateful for that
Yeah,
thus far. We'll,
yeah,
we'll
that's
see what
good.
the Lambgoaters have to say.
Yeah, it's a fickle crowd that little audience there. It's just a bunch of bad comedians telling bad jokes.
Yeah,
That's how I look at it. Yeah, fun
that's
troop. But yeah, so how is it like because you guys have been working? I mean, this is the first record in a couple of years, and I know it's like I think it's correct me if I'm wrong, but is it the first one with Tom or the second one with Tom?
this is our second release with Tom.
Yeah, I know he joined the band, and I didn't know. I mean, I know he joined the band a couple years ago. I didn't know if you guys put out a record by that time or if it right away. But yeah, that makes sense because it's been a number of years, and I know it's been a number of years since you guys put out a record. Hence this record, which is part one of a double feature record that you guys got going on. Suffer in Hell dropped today. Suffer in Heaven drops next year, a couple months from now, right?
Yeah. March 17th is the drop date.
And like obviously we're gonna get into like just like the stupid questions here, but like how did that come about, the double album? Was it because you guys had so much holdover material from the COVID like restriction stuff, or did you guys just really crank some stuff out? And how did you decide to make it a double album?
Well, we always try to reach the studio with a surplus of material just so that we can, with a producer's assistance, outside perspective, listen through and really refine it down to what we feel is the strongest batch. So this album we went in with like 30 something ideas, and initially when we got there, we weren't going to do two albums, we weren't going to do 16 songs. But that process of refining just kind of led us to realize we had a lot of material we were stoked on our hands. And a lot of times, you could just use it for the next album, like, okay, we like this song but we'll save it for later. But with this one, we just felt it had been so long, and it was going to be so long between even the recording process and today, release day, that we wanted to come back swinging a little harder with more material, just show
Hmm.
that the last few years, including lockdowns and whatnot, weren't just like lazy times for us. It was a lot of work, and a lot of thought went into it just to push the band forward. So it really just came out of having so much material and being so stoked on a lot of it. And then when we had 16 songs, we were like, we can't drop a 16 song deathcore album, like that's too much. And at the same time, 16 songs, people are going to breeze past a lot of them. They'll find their favorites, and some of them may be an afterthought. We just didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to give people the opportunity to look over songs. You get 8 songs, each of them is more meaningful than if you had 16 all at once. So yeah, and we just said fuck it, 2 albums.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't really happen that often, but also I mean your explanation of that led me to think of a couple more things to ask you here. So you guys came into the studio with 30 something ideas. What happens to those? I mean, I and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would doubt you show up to the studio normally with a plethora of like 30 plus songs to whittle down from. But when you arrived at the studio with however many songs you do per album cycle, what happens to those songs that don't make the cut? Do they just like stay around in limbo to where you guys tweak them, fiddle with them, or do you just like cut them off and say goodbye forever?
They usually just wind up in the boneyard, you know. I mean, there are some of them don't get chosen because it's like, well, I only brought a minute and a half of this, and it's going to take a lot more work to turn this minute and a half into a full song. So some of them, you know, I won't forget about and polish up maybe for another release or for my own personal music or whatever it may be. They tend to just kind of fall by the wayside and be forgotten about, but trying to be better about that. You know, a lot of work goes into even making a minute of material, at least for
Yeah.
me. So it's I don't know. I used to just never look back. I was like, I've done that. It's a thing of the past. It's not going to be relevant now. So forget about this material. But sometimes, you know, there are pearls, you know, within that mass of unused material. So just sift through that and see what you want to hang on to.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's nothing.
How often do you ever, if ever, do you go back and listen to old material that's not selected?
You know, I keep like a folder on my computer just of everything we've made throughout all of time. There's so much material in there. And when I'm getting back into like writing mode, which, you know, I'll probably start doing now, um, I will sift through all of that and just sort of pluck from it what I enjoy. But, you know, it's fun sometimes even just to listen without the intent of what am I going to use.
Mhm.
It's kind of like a time capsule, you know,
Yeah.
takes me back to where I was, what I was feeling,
That's
stuff like
why,
that.
yeah, that's why I was asking you because I mean, I've been removed from a band for many years, almost 2 decades now. So, but I will say that I can remember how I felt about that material 20 something years ago. And then like I played it for somebody the other day and I was like, huh, this is a lot faster than I remember and a lot heavier than I remember and a lot better than I, gave myself credit for, I guess. So yeah, it's really weird how like, you know, different you age or days go by and you look back at something with almost like a fresh set of eyes or listen with a fresh set of ears and you do find those little nuggets in there. So that's kind of what I was asking because obviously coming to the table with a plethora of material, it almost sounds like half of that was either left behind or not explored because you already had solid leads elsewhere. So
Yeah, I mean, time is a good vetting process. You know, if something holds up years later or when you're in a different point in life and you still enjoy it, then that's a good indicator that it's worth keeping around. And sometimes you do surprise yourself. There have been songs from every record I've done with Grin that we didn't choose them for one reason or another, but I look back and I'm like, well, it's not that this was a bad song. It's just that in the context of the record, it wouldn't have made sense. So it's not for nothing.
yeah,
But yeah, it's crazy to look back sometimes.
it's always good too. Another thing I was gonna inquire about is how you guys used to have during your time in the band and then obviously prior there was multiple guitar players at some point. You had three at
Hmm.
some point. So how does that play into the new kind of uh, lineup? I don't want to call it new lineup, but the new shape of the band with it being a four piece. Do you guys like do you I don't know. Do you guys think about that differently now when you're writing, or is it still just like we can layer on layer on layer, and then we'll just deal with it in live? Like if we ever have to play it live, we'll have a hired on hand or play it through a backtrack or something.
We do use a guitar track in a live setting, so you know I've got the reassurance that if I am writing multiple guitar parts on top of one another, that I can facilitate that in a
Mhm.
live setting as well. But for me, it's very much about like I know people want to see a lot of guitarists up there. I know people chime in about, oh, you know, it's a cop out to have a track. You know, so many bands, more bands that I can think of use a guitar track than don't. So it's like for me, it's just about if I'm going to write music that's going to require multiple guitars, then it's my job to perform every part that I physically can in a live setting. So you come watch us live and it's like I'm weaving between all these parts. It's way harder to play this shit live than
Yeah.
it is to like record it just because I'm trying to cover every base. And that's like part pride, you know, like I don't want to feel like I'm slacking. If there's a solo being played, of course I'm going to play a solo. If there's leads being played, I have to play those. If there's rhythms under them, then I'm going to do my best to touch on them at some point or another. It's just about kind of showcasing that we can play all of these parts. We're not using the track as a cop out. It's but it does kind of influence the way you write. You know, I don't want to create things that I won't be able to translate to a live setting, and that's become more important to me as now I'm the only guitarist. So it comes with a certain degree of responsibility. I mean, there are parts on this album that have like 3 guitar parts playing at once, but it's just a matter of like, okay, how can I structure this so that I can play through each of these 3 guitar parts at some point or another throughout this song. So you kind of do have to be thoughtful about it, but then sometimes I'm like, screw it, just gonna go hard, I'll figure it out later, which is kind of where I'm at right now.
Interesting. Yeah, because
Now,
it all my like a thing that I was thinking of is like it's one thing to like, I mean, I don't write guitars, so I it's foreign to me. You know what I mean? I don't write music on guitar, so it's completely foreign as to how I would layer, guitars on top of each other, let alone write one just guitar part for, one guitarist's part, let alone adding on other things on top. So it's got to be very difficult. Do you like, not to say that you miss it, but do you ever like wish that you had another guitarist, like another dedicated guitarist that had like input on ideas and stuff like that? Or do you bring people in on that process, whether you're like just writing stuff at your house or in the studio with the guys? Do you get other people to like, you know, toss ideas? Other, I should say, not other people, other guitarists to toss ideas against?
um, not really. I mean, I don't say this from an arrogant standpoint. It's just like I don't feel I need the help. So there's no lack of inspiration. There's no need for a nudge, you know, to in a certain direction to like keep things moving. It's usually a pretty fluid process for me, and it does take a lot of time. I don't know if bringing another guitarist would maybe expedite some of it, but my writing process is slow and methodical. And I do sometimes think, okay, if I had not even just a guitarist, if I had anyone else sitting in this room with me, then maybe I'd feel a little bit more energized to like get more done on this song today type situation. But there's no hole in the process that we feel needs to be filled. You know, it's all getting done. It's a little slower, but that's also just our process. You know, the authenticity comes from taking time for us. So I miss having another guitarist in a live setting just because I would love to be like, all right, dude, you got to play this solo. I'm chilling out for this one, but no such luck.
Yeah.
And the need isn't great enough to where it's worth it yet, you know. It's not a never say, it's a never say never situation. Like we may bring someone in at some point. I've thought about it. I've got a lot of friends that I would love to have up there with us, but the machine is operating smoothly. So,
Hmm. Plus, another mouth to feed, regardless.
well, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
we used to have 6 guys in this band, and when it came time at the end of tour to pay everyone out, it was like, God damn, all right,
Yeah.
well,
It's crazy because a
that
lot
hurts
of,
a little bit.
yeah, exactly. A lot of bands don't necessarily think about that. And uh, it's funny, not funny, but it's interesting that, you I've been able to see bands like start and end, and I've seen, the last 20 something years, there's been a lot of bands come and go, but you also get to see bands that are at one point were of, many members, and now they've dwindled down to 4 or a tight core, even 3 sometimes. So it's just funny because obviously, when you're thinking of that as a young musician, and you just want to do it for fun, but then you realize at some point it can't just be fun. It's got to pay bills. And then you start getting into that mindset of like, oh, how can I maintain this? Oh, well, if we cut out this or this, or if we do this or this. There's another band that I was talking to, relatively recent, that has quite a large number of members, and um, I don't know if all the band members know it, but I think they're going to be sizing down. shortly.
Oh, uh-oh.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I
it'll
mean
be
it's a
fun.
business. Like
Of
you've
course.
gotta you've gotta have a business mentality as much as when I first started touring and joined the band, I wanted it to be fun and games. I quickly realized that it's gotta you've got to have a good structure to your business. And let's be honest, a bunch of band dudes in a band is like crazy.
CEOs. Yeah, it's a bunch of CEOs in a band. In the
Yeah,
band.
a bunch of CEOs who just like bicker and are highly opinionated and take subjective things and approach them from objective standpoints. So I don't miss it. I mean, I
No.
miss everyone that has been in our band, and I love them all dearly. But I like that now it's just a nice small group text and things get decided quickly.
Hmm. Do you guys all live in the same location?
No, we're all spread out. I live in
Yeah.
Oregon. Bassist David is in Utah. Tom, our vocalist, is in North Carolina now, and drummer is in Indiana. It's a lot of flights to book.
Yeah. It's a lot of, it sounds like a lot of slow moving parts sometimes.
Yeah, we've got our system though. You know,
Mhm.
it's the communication is rapid and open. So
Not to keep harping on the writing, but obviously the new record just dropped today. But so how does that work? Like, who comes to the table with the idea, or does it matter who? Like, is there a sole person that is like the main bulk songwriter? And I don't want to assume that's you because you're the guitarist, but like, maybe David comes with the bass line, or maybe Tom has an idea, or there's drum fill or a drum part that you guys build around. But like, what's you know, the main structure to kick things off?
I do a large portion of the songwriting myself. Um, and I think, I'll get ideas and I'll send them to my band and we'll communicate about, oh, this could use this, or even, whatever feedback I can get from them. When we are all in the same place, we do get in a room together and write,
Hmm.
and it's a lot of like, oh, here's a melody I have in my head. Steven, can you turn this into a full-blown riff? Can you get the drums, the bass, the production up and like help me realize this little vision I have? And so it is more collaborative when we're all together, but because we're apart, um, I do a large portion of
Right.
the songwriting. Yeah.
And not to say the last album wasn't significant by any means, but because Tom had only just recently entered the band, you had the previous vocalist who was a longtime vocalist. That was basically like one of the last remaining members, even though David had been in the band for over 10 years at this point, or over, yeah, almost 15 at this point. But would you say, because you're part of the new, I don't want to say new squad because you've been in the band for 5, 6, 7 years now too, but is this kind of like, I feel like this could be like the next chapter, right? Like even though the last album had Tom on it and it had all you guys on it, would it be safe to say like this is like this group's next chapter? Like, so Chelsea Grin has turned a page, and this offering is like the new Chelsea Grin going forward. Not to say new, but new vibes, new everything.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. And yeah, it is very much sort of an ushering of a new era for us. And that's sonically, aesthetically, every part of it, we want it to be clear that this is a step in another direction. For us, it feels forward and it feels upward. But as long as people get the sense that this is not a new band, we still try to stay very true to the core of the band, different members, the lack of originality in the membership. It's still, we're trying to pay homage to what made the band what it is. And I think people, would be able to hear that if they listen closely enough. But it is in our heads also sort of a new time,
Yeah,
it's
it's
I think.
it felt like that. I don't know if I felt like that with the album or anything like that, but it did feel like a quote unquote defining moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the sound that you're hearing from our band now is what you'll hear consistently moving forward. And obviously we'll try to up the ante and push the envelope with each release. But this is what you get and this is what you can expect,
Yeah. In your opinion, this is going to be a dumb question, but I have to ask it. In your opinion, which is the better of the two albums, Hell or Heaven?
It's a tough one. Right now I want to lean toward Heaven. I think partly because I've listened to um Suffer in Hell so much at this point. Like it's, oh, we got Mike here. He's dropping off my Popeyes.
I saw Popeyes.
Thanks, Mike. I'm a little blown out on Suffer in Hell. I mean, I still really enjoy it. We didn't put the albums together with the intention of one being more anything than the other, but I do feel like Suffer in Heaven, the second album, has a little more like staple Grin sound, but it's also more exploratory. It's got groove. It's just a little bit more up my alley. I mean, I love it all. I just genuinely think that my relationship with the two albums is based on which one I'm hearing more of at the time. And so having gone through the whole release cycle of getting Hell out there, I've just been exposed to it a lot more than the second half. So and I don't know, based on what I've seen from people today, I mean, it's been super positive, but the little bits I'm seeing of like, I wish there was more X, or I miss Y. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I know this is coming to you on Suffer in Heaven. So I don't know. Picking a favorite is tough, but at the moment we're going with Heaven.
I get you. Well, it gives the fans to look something to look forward to, obviously, because if they enjoy the and Suffer in Hell, they may enjoy Heaven more, or they may just like it more because now you've said it, so you kind of put that into their head, you know.
I'm tricking them. I'm
Subliminally.
playing mental games with them. I'm
Yeah.
gaslighting them into believing they already like the second album more.
Yeah. Where do the names come from? The titles, Suffer in Heaven, Suffer in Hell.
I mean, it was kind of reflective of where we were in the time of choosing the titles. It was just observing a lot of suffering happening within our camp, but also everywhere. And it feels like there's this ramp up in a negativity in our collective consciousness as people, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people, obviously through the pandemic, were going through the same shit together. But then it sort of made us reflect that, like, you know, nobody is above pain and suffering in their life. You know, you don't go through the entirety of your life with no suffering, and that speaks from the highest to the lowest points of society. It's something that none of us go without. So there's some measure of everybody can relate through having felt pain in their life. And we were like, well, if everybody's feeling it, you know, I guess you feel it in hell and you feel it in heaven all the same. There's no hiding from it.
Right.
So really it was just sort of a reflection on a reflection of just how we were observing the world to feel, our loved ones, our friends, and people we didn't even know. It was there's a common denominator here, and that is suffering.
Right. And outside of just the normal pandemic, yada yada stuff, because I hate talking about that because I've had to talk about it for 2 years with the Zoom podcasting going on. That's been fun. But what does Steven suffer from that he put into the record, if he doesn't mind sharing?
I think there's just a lot of battles through life, and you know, I don't want to steer this interview in a different direction, but for me, like, since I was a kid, have had all sorts of depression and anxiety issues, just pretty severe throughout my whole life. But I've had a great life, you know. It's not because of necessarily my surroundings. It's more to do with, it's just chemically has occurred for me, you know. And so I've dealt with that a ton throughout my life, and there's been a lot of loss, and especially in the last 5 or 6 years, I mean, I've lost a ton of extremely dear friends and a lot of family. And so, you know, for me, it's like I reflect on it and I'm like, I've had a great life. I'm really grateful for everything I've had, but it doesn't save me from this shit that I feel, you know. So, you know, another testament to, like, no matter who you are, you're not going to avoid it. But you know, it's been a lot. I think also just who I am and the position of being in a band sometimes is a lot more complex and intense than people know, and keeping this business running is a difficult task. So as my responsibilities have mounted, um, you kind of have to balance regular life
Hmm.
with making this crazy occupation work for you.
Yeah.
So there's just been a lot of struggle there, and grateful for it always, no matter what. But there's a lot of challenge,
Yeah.
and I think this is something that all of us in the band can relate on. Like, we've all had our own mental health issues. We've all faced different dilemmas, and that's kind of where we came to find this commonality that caused us to look outward and see it all around us.
Yeah. Not to harp on what you had originally brought up about the feelings that you were having, like since you were a kid and this, that, the other, and mental health and stuff like that. And by all means, if I ask you a question, you don't have to answer it. But I feel like you were saying, like, ever since you were a kid, you had the feelings of depression and anxiety and stuff like that, which is funny that you bring that up because in the last couple months, weeks or so, I've really been harping on that in my own thought process. Like, um, I also indulge in marijuana every now and then. And I think the part that I actually enjoy about that is sometimes I do just freak out. You know what I mean? Like, not like I don't freak out, like have a freak out in the real world, but like internally, all the spidey senses are going and I'm like fully freaking out inside. But I also semi like that. It also makes me realize like you're alive. So I don't know if like feeling those, I don't know if I got like into feeling down just like growing up, just like this is how it feels. And then I became like associated with that feeling of like, well, this is how I always feel. So that's just me. And then I kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say like fell in love with that feeling, but I just got used to it. And then I started thinking recently, I was like, well, maybe everyone really is like that because you do suffer every day all nonstop for the most part. I mean, it's mostly suffering. You get little blips here that are good, but you need the bad to tell you that it's good. You know what I mean? So you need to have both. So part of me was like, maybe everyone's just kind of faking the funk around, and everyone really is feeling the same shitty way. Because the more people that I talk to, it feels like that's kind of a thing. Like, and it could all be because we are in this heavy, music genre and this industry because a lot of people that have those kind of issues sometimes gravitate towards heavier, more angsty music, and then obviously the community that comes within that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I see a lot of people talking about depression and anxiety and how it's like a bad thing sometimes. And granted, there are bad cases. I'm not saying having depression or anxiety is great. Everyone should have it. But I think I realized it's part of me and it's part of it makes me who I am and it's part of my uniqueness and whatnot. And I don't think I'm bummed about it anymore. You know what I mean? I think I just fucking just I'm gonna wake up today or tomorrow and do the same thing all over again and try to move forward regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
So fuck it.
Yeah, I think it is important to have the highs and the lows, and it's healthy to feel a full spectrum of emotion. I think that where it becomes unhealthy and scary is when you don't know how to approach it or how to live with it, or just surmount the obstacle that you're facing. But I
Mhm.
think that it is a good exercise, and like you said, like I feel a catharsis sometimes in feeling down. I mean, that's why people love to go for drives on rainy days and listen to the
Yeah.
saddest shit they've ever heard. You know what I mean? Feels
Purposely making
good.
yourself feel bad. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know psychologically whether these things are, if it's healthy to put that much energy into, like, fuck it, I'm sad today. We're gonna drive that point home. But it does feel good. It is therapeutic to embrace the sadness in a way. Um, yeah, so and I do feel like, it's even just it's outside the metal community is inclined, I think, to feel angst. But I've observed that it's not just metal people who feel angst, it's just metal people who
Hmm.
use metal to address that angst.
Right.
But, but yeah, it's been an interesting time, and this is independent of pandemic stuff. It's like it's an interesting time to be alive. There's so
Yes, it is.
much. Going through a day of living is insane amounts of stimulus, and like it's just unhealthy. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how old you are, but I grew up with none of this stuff. I
Yeah.
lived a very different life, and like I said, I faced my issues even as a kid, and even since then, but everything has changed. And now there's so much that you're exposed to every day that's trying to elicit some emotion from you, and I think that's just fucked up.
Hmm.
You know, I think people are helpless to feeling this way. If you're connected at all to the world around you, what's happening to you around you on your phone everywhere, then how can you fight that?
Yeah.
It's all consuming.
Yeah. I feel the same exact way, and this is where the metal podcast gets weird. But yeah, I feel the same way about the stimulus and stuff like that, and about you could. I mean, if we're having a conversation that's not recorded with the entire world, you could bring up probably anything that's going on negative in the world or in society or something like that, and my response would be probably like, I just don't think the human body or mind really can deal with like all the stress that's going on currently. And that's why there's so many different things going on, regardless. Like,
Mhm.
regardless. That's why, you know, there's so many more ADHD kids out there, or whatever that is, because I was an ADHD kid, so who knows what that is, right? But like, there's so much more diagnosed this, that, and the other stuff coming on, and like being depressed or being anxious or being blah 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 blah. It's like, yeah, but if you just really think about it, because like you said, I didn't have the internet when I was a kid. Like I got the internet like 14, 15 years old. Like, it was out, but like my parents, we didn't have a computer or anything like that. So I was around it, but I never had it in the house until that time. And like I just turned 39. So, I definitely played outside. Is not saying that kids don't do it now, but it was a different time, like you said. And I feel like when you were a kid, and like say 15 years ago, you go to New York City, you stand in Times Square, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Because you're from a whatever town, then you go to New York
Mhm.
City, and it's just like there's so much shit going on in Times Square. Everyone's wanting your attention. Everyone wants this, that, the other. You're exhausted. But
Yeah.
now, that's like every second on your fucking phone. Like no matter
Mhm.
where you're at Lambgoat, there's an ad. You're at Instagram, there's a fucking someone trying to get you to do something they want you to do. Go down this funnel or something like that. Like you're being marketed and advertised every fucking second of the day. Yeah, your brain is gonna, the human brain, not your brain, but the human brain is gonna break a little bit. And I think that's why we have this kind of like mass confusion about a lot of things, not just one topic in general, but just like, then you throw in the other shit like the pandemic, the fucking political bullshit, whatever side you're on. There's like, it's never getting better, or it seems like it's never getting better. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think if we kind of slowed it down, which isn't going to happen, I think brains may get better over time, but they also could do the other thing and just adapt to the stimulus and eventually curve, but who knows?
It is interesting. I mean, like even like myself, sometimes I'll play a video game, but the video game's not enough. I have to have The Sopranos playing on my laptop as well.
Yeah.
And like I'm not even paying attention. I'm just like I don't know what it is. My brain is diverging, and like even just those things. I catch myself being this way and I'm like, wow, what a piece of trash I am. But I think a lot of people face these similar
For
things, and
sure.
and especially lately where there's so much happening in the world and people want to be on the right side of history, right? They want to fight for the things they believe in, which is amazing, and they should. But when there's so much to fight for and you're so spread out, I encourage people to speak up for what they believe in no matter what. But at the end of the day, you're exerting so much energy, and it's difficult. It's difficult to maintain your mental health when you've exerted so much energy outward.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying this to like discourage anyone from standing up for what they believe in. It's just I think a natural symptom of all of this stimulus. It's
It's a
we're
lot.
not wired for this, and I think that some years from now, when we've had enough time to observe the population across this long longitudinal study, we'll say, holy shit, this is the turning point, And look where we are at this point in time. It's like this is
Yeah.
gonna be one crazy time for psychology,
Oh, for
for sure.
sure. I almost can't wait for it. I hope I'm around for those studies, but it does seem like it'll take a long time. And to piggyback off of like what you were saying about like speaking up and all that stuff, it's like I think a lot of people also have to be cautious of like it's really easy to get used like for those kinds of things, for those kind of like virtuous kind of causes and stuff like that. Like obviously like these, not everything is like that, but there are some organizations that will be that just kind of like use that in negative light to like just kind of like I don't know echo chamber and do all sorts of shit. So like it's really difficult. You have to like know that you have to really know you're not getting played, which is again super fucking difficult on the internet. So I don't know. You just be wary. You got to
You
be wary.
remember Coney
Yeah,
2012?
yeah.
I'm pretty sure I still send $20 a month to goddamn Greenpeace.
Yeah, well,
Hey, you live and you learn, and it's hard to navigate through the internet at this point in time and know what's safe and what's healthy. I just people's judgment will grow, but at the same time, the the resistance, that counter force, is going to adapt and grow as well. So it's a scary thought, moving forward. I try not to think about it too much. I try to just live in the moment and enjoy and just reflect on what's in my immediate life, and be a soldier for the causes that I have the bandwidth to be there for,
mhm.
I think. But the lesson I've learned for myself lately is, um some selfishness is important. It doesn't have to be negative selfishness. There's positive selfishness where, and you hear it all the time in like rom-coms and shit, but like if you're not your best self, you are not going to give your best to the world around you,
Yeah, you're correct. You're
so
correct.
sometimes it just takes a little bit of self-serving, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing.
No, you're right. And we're gonna switch gears here because it was getting kind of depressing, which I
We're doing the
like.
TED
So
talk.
yeah, which is depressing in psychology, and I like that. So, but I know that the people that are tuning in don't want to listen to just that. So one thing before we kind of move on from the new album, the new well, both albums are coming out with your partnership with one RPM.
Hmm.
What's the partnership? Like, can you give us some of the details of it? Like, are they your label? Are you putting it out in partners with them? So it's like self-release kind of, but they're just a distro or
So they are just a distro company, but they do offer a ton of label services, more than we expected when we first signed. They've been so amazing about facilitating certain processes of this and help connecting us to, like PR companies, that connect us together, and outlets for playlisting and things like this, maximizing our YouTube, activity, things like this. They cover a lot of bases, but it's just a distro deal. They just happen to have a lot of label services involved. So, the creative freedom is entirely there. We do have more responsibility. It is up to us to, you know, be on the front lines of making everything happen, but it's very collaborative. Whereas with a label, um, it's more like, this is what's happening, this is how it's going to get done, not really asking how we want to get things done. And I don't have beef with labels personally. I mean, they come in handy, but it is refreshing to be in a situation like this. And we're able to, because we're more established as a band, it's we can afford to do some of these things ourselves. And if we take a little bit of a hit or whatever, people still, a lot of people have still heard our name. So we're in a position where the label backing maybe isn't quite so imperative to getting the message out. But 1RPM has been really, really awesome. I mean, I text with our representative from there every day, and I've never texted with a single representative of our labels of the past, even once. So the connection is deep. They care about the project. Um, it's just a lot of fun, and I appreciate the freedom to do what we want. We see more money out of this release than ever before. The deal is great, and it's just they're it allows for creativity to reign supreme, um which in the past, like, you have to worry about deadlines and things like this, and there's a lot of pressure. But these guys, it was just an open, friendly, supportive process. And yeah, they're great. Love 1RPM.
So is it like one of those things where like they just whenever you got it, you have whenever it's done, and just give it to us then? There's no stress on that or anything?
I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to divulge this information, but in our contract we originally signed, we should have had the album to them way sooner.
Oh, okay.
But we just explained to them, hey, I mean, for one, COVID struck and booking studio time became a whole other monster. For two, we decided when we were in the studio, we were going to track another 5 songs and book more time down the line. Like, we really, it feels like every few months we'd be like, hey, so this came up, and we'll get it to you soon, you know? And they've been really chill about that. We were supposed to have it in much quicker, but they were also super understanding of us taking our time. And of course, like, more songs means more benefit for everybody, you
Right,
know?
right, right.
So they had no complaints there.
Awesome. You were saying about the length of a deathcore record.
Hmm.
Why is it that a deathcore record can't be multiple songs in length? Why do you think that is? Or is that just something that maybe should be changed?
Well, I've always loved a full length. Like, you really get your message across through a full length. And a lot of people are like, oh, you have to release singles, it's singles only, maybe an EP. But from the artistry perspective, conveying your message, it's like if and I'm not really comparing musicianship to literature, but if someone was to tell you you had to write a novel but you only had 100 pages to do it, it's like cramming all of that in there just isn't the same. You're not going to get the point across as effectively. So I support lengthy albums. I do think that in a genre like deathcore, there is such thing as maybe too much, where it's like your brain is rotting by the time you're done listening to. And for us, it was almost an hour worth of material, and that's just a shitload of material. And the music is brutal and heavy and jarring. And I think 16 songs would be too much. I think like the standard full length format, 10 to 13 songs is more palatable. But even just a few beyond that, when I would listen to it in full, it was like, this is dense and it's hard to keep my attention on the album. And I love it. I wrote the thing, but
Yeah, yeah.
my mind in the course of an hour cannot just stay centrally focused. And like I said before, we want every song to have its moment and its time in the spotlight. And it's not going to happen if it's 16 happening all at once. I think doing 8 and 8 allows people to sit and simmer and stew with these songs more personally and more in depth. And there have been a lot of lengthy deathcore releases in years of late, and I'm not knocking that. I just think we wanted to try something a little different, but it's also not our style to just put out singles. I mean, we've done that in the past, but that's more like, here's a snack while we work on dinner. The format of the genre, it's just the story can be told a lot better when songs are played in succession. But you get too long and it's like reading a dense book, and eventually you're reading it but you're not absorbing it.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line. I think everyone obviously is free to do as they please, and a lot of it depends on the material. For these albums, there's so many sounds present on the 2 albums. I don't know, it's a lot to digest. So that's why it felt important to chop it in half.
Yeah. you mentioned singles. That's a good segue to my next question here. Your latest single, Forever Bloom, you guys did with Trevor.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you're the ones, if you're the person to ask, but it seems like Trevor was working with a lot of people in this last year or so, because I feel like a lot of songs have come out featuring him. Um, and it seemed like that was more than usual. I don't know, but what do you do you think that's the do you feel the same way, like Trevor was getting, and I'm not saying that for any one reason or another, it just felt like Trevor was getting out there more, that's all.
I mean, it could have just been a byproduct of having all that downtime. You
True,
know,
true.
I think keeping busy is important. I know that Trevor was just a massive giver. It was all about give, give, give to the community. And so I when we reached out for the feature, of course I was scared of him saying no, but at the same time I was like, he would love to do this. Just not because it's us, but because it's a way to give more to the community, which is really seemed like his life motto. But I think the volume, any increase in volume of features, I think I mean, I can only speculate, but I feel like it's probably a product of downtime. And of course they had been touring and like picked it up once things opened back up again. But yeah, I just you got to fill that downtime somehow.
I feel you. Was there ever a thought of like not releasing it because he passed?
Yeah, that it was a huge debate. Um and not like any one of us was like we absolutely can't, whereas others were like we absolutely must. Like all of us at the same time are like, is this in bad form? Is this just impolite? Is this
Yeah.
like without taste to do this? And I did reach out to um people from the band just to like get their blessing and see, attempt to reach out to his family and get their blessing as well. um and we just wanted to make sure we did it all properly. And we knew that song was going to be a single for a long time. um so it's not like the decision to make it a single came after his passing, but we were gearing up to prepare to make that a single when it had happened. And at that point it was just like we felt as though, and people from his band expressed the same thought, we that Trevor would want to have this released. He would want people to hear him on a track. He would have supported the release of the song or any song with him on it. There's been multiple since his passing. And but for us it was really important to make sure that you know his peers, his family, and those closest to him were okay with that. So that was, it was a major thing, and we above all else didn't want to disrespect anyone um by releasing it.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to cover all our bases and make sure everyone felt okay with it.
Yeah, it's just it's so weird because obviously, like you said, there's a lot of downtime, so there would be. I didn't really think about that because obviously we're kind of somewhat removed from the lockdown stuff, but a lot of that stuff would have been coming out, now, so that makes sense. But part of me was also like, it's just strange how like right afterwards there was just a lot of singles featuring him, which again, if he was working on it prior, then it is what it is. But part of me couldn't help but think that it's also like, I don't know, timing wise.
Reactionary
Yeah,
to his
yeah,
passing.
timing wise, it just was weird. But and again, that's why I asked, because obviously I know that there was no one's out there going like, all right, kick the bucket. Let's put this out so we can capitalize on all of the notoriety going on right now. Obviously,
Would hope not. Yeah.
that's not something that most bands, if not all 99.9% of the bands that had him featured, are feeling like that. But you know, I don't know. People take everything a certain way, and like obviously, like I didn't take it that way, but I was like, it does look weird, sound weird, but it is what it is. But that seems to have I don't want to say worked out, but it seems to be a great song for you guys on the record. And like you said, um, you know, he took the time and effort to put that on record with you guys. So I would assume that, and with and anybody else, and I would assume he'd want that to see the light of day at some point. So it is. I hate saying it, but it is what it is, you know. So there's that. But
Yeah.
um, my last
Rest
thing,
in peace to Trevor.
yeah, R.I.P. Trevor. Uh, Also kind of glad the band's kind of continuing on. I guess that's kind of like, you know, a nod to him going forward without changing. I know a lot of people want the band to change the name and all this, that, the other stuff. And people always have an opinion about everything, but you know, keep the band going. I'm assuming his family gets royalties or whomever get, you know, so keep it going.
People really wanted them to change the name. I mean, like,
Oh, people want you like people. I'm sure want you guys to change the name. People want
oh,
everyone to change.
100 fucking
Yeah, yeah,
percent.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just like, all right, dude, suck it. It ain't
Yeah.
happening. Waste your breath some more.
Yeah, it is one of those things. I don't know. The band names are just so weird, especially like it is what it is. But I want to ask you your comments or your thoughts and comments on like deathcore, just because it does seem like that is a genre that is on the up and up.
Yeah.
The young kids, they seem to really gravitate towards the deathcore. Uh, and I think, you know, I used to talk shit about people that listened not to deathcore, but to like other forms of, you know, butt rock or mainstream rock that I didn't listen to. But I feel like there's certain extreme genres. Deathcore is one of those right now. That's very uh, that benefits from like these social media platforms like Reels and stuff like that, and when you can ingest things in short form because there's our you know deathcore has these like short brutal breakdown parts or just short brutal parts in general, and I think that you know kind of gets like some of these younger kids that are on TikTok and Instagram just kind of scrolling. That's their entry point, which I'm okay with. It's better than, you know, I don't want to say another big band name, but you know, it's better than that band because at least you're in the underground world somehow, and you can really navigate around in the underground a lot more than if you were just based on the mainstream. But what do you think the rise in deathcore has been from, and where do you think the trajectory of it will go?
Um, well,
Do you think
it
it'll be
has
more
been.
palatable? Like, do you think like because like you said earlier, how things sometimes it might not be as palatable to listen to 16 songs in a row. Do you think that deathcore will find like a way to make it palatable, or to like what the future holds?
It's interesting. I think as long as everybody is producing authentic music and just writing what they want to write, that's what will push the genre forward even more. You know, I think deathcore is sort of pulling from all other facets of metal. And that's kind of why it's fun, at least for me to write, is because deathcore is so inclusive. It's got death metal, you can have black metal influence, you've got breakdowns, you can pull from hardcore, you can pull from doom, you can pull from anything in the metal world and include it in your deathcore sound. And I think this is part of why it's such a successful genre at the moment. I mean, there are bands and there are tons of exciting bands coming out right now, in my opinion. Like Brand of Sacrifice is a band that is absolutely redefining. They have a sound to them that no one else has. And they do such a damn good job of it that if I wasn't a fan of deathcore, you know, if I heard that, I'd at least be like, okay, well, this is fresh, this is exciting, this is new. There's bands like Lorna Shore. I mean, it's you hear their name everywhere, obviously, and I'm sure I'm the 15th person you've talked to this week that's brought them up. But like, obviously, they've been around for a long time, but they pushed their sound even further, included more and more into it, and really made a moment of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that's something that it's undeniable. You know, you're going to see their name if you're looking on the internet. And like you said, certain media platforms make it are substantial in like boosting a lot of bands up. You know, the content intake does help, you know, get your name out there better. And so I think, you know, it's a sort of a perfect storm of like people are figuring out how to optimize their exposure via social media, and people are refining their sound in a genre that's been sort of building over the last 20 some odd years. You know, deathcore is pretty new, you know, in the span of the world of music. And so I think it's taken time to refine the sound. You know, there's the original, the OG greatness, and then there's like, okay, well, this is our square of stone, and how are we going to chisel our busts into this? This is the foundation, and how do we pull from this to create shit moving forward? And I do think there was a while where there was a struggle. I mean, even for myself and past iterations of Chelsea Grin, it was like there were albums that had a confused identity, and then now I think bands like ourselves are really at this point of like, okay, we've refined our identity. So now we can charge forward full steam ahead.
Yeah.
And I also like, there's this phenomenon, I feel like, where every 10 years or so, genres of music semi revitalize. And like, I this idea was originally presented to me by the dude who produced our last record, Drew Folk. He was like, have you ever noticed this inexplicable, maybe explicable, but like this larger than life occurrence where there's a 10-year cycle on all sorts of music? And that rings true with deathcore. I mean, you think about 10 years ago, 2012, and a little before that, that's really when this genre was becoming its own thing, when it was really emerging. And I guess like in sort of the mid 2000 to 2010 area, you saw a lot of that too.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna say
now
like Joplin
here,
Cowboy, Blood, as Blood Runs Back, all those bands started popping up in the mid 2000s, and then that's why I brought it up, because it seemed like in the mid 2010s there was a lull, but I feel like there was a lull for a lot of metal,
I
personally.
think I think so. And I couldn't really tell you exactly why. My thought is that it's just a refinement period. The genre started, at point A, and then everything between point A and point B was like taking what we learned from point A and maximizing on it, like really establishing everyone's individual identity. And I think for a long time it was a lot of recreation. It wasn't so much individual sound coming out of people, and I speak, I say this about myself as well. It was like I was focused on recreating something rather than creating something new.
Gotcha.
And so now you hear bands that don't sound like any other bands. You hear bands that have been around for a long time writing music that doesn't sound like anything but them, or really finding their voice. So I don't know, that's just my theory on it.
I gotcha. To piggyback off of that, why does deathcore get such a bad name?
I think that other genres of metal are chock full of elitism, and you start seeing it pop up more and more in deathcore. Everyone's comparing band to band and saying, well, in my professional opinion, this is horseshit music. And you see more and more of that. But I think deathcore, breakdowns for one, that's something that your average death metal enthusiast is not a fan of. And like,
Yeah.
it's a foundational part of the deathcore sound. Like, it's almost not deathcore without breakdowns.
Mhm.
I think that was a point of ridicule for a long time, and breakdowns can be cheesy. I mean, as I've gotten older, I'm less about the breakdown and more about the riff, but you wouldn't think that listening to our new record, but like, I get that. And to be honest, where deathcore started was kind of cringy. Like, my band, they used to straighten their hair and choreograph their dance moves on stage and shit like that. Like,
Oh yeah.
it's not that cool. It's
Oh
a
yeah.
little bit embarrassing. Um, so it started off as, I feel like it started off as a joke to a lot of people. And that sort of thought pattern, just, it still exists today. There are still people who, like, I'm convinced, people who hate our band because they didn't like us in 2010 because it
Hmm.
was pretty cringe, and like, they won't let go of that. And so I think, it's just a matter of like generational thought processes that just don't die. And I don't mean generation like actual generations of people, but like, these people who started or were there for the foundation of deathcore,
Yeah,
they
like an
continue.
era, an
Yeah,
era, whatever that is.
yeah, exactly. This bias just kind of still runs through their blood. And so it gets the short end of the stick a lot of the time.
Mm.
But it's fun. Like we did a tour with Dying Fetus in May. And
Is that the show that I saw you guys at? I think that's you guys played here, Jacksonville. I was trying to think in this conversation. I was like, I just
Jacksonville,
saw it,
North Carolina or Florida?
Florida.
Okay. I didn't even know Jacksonville, North Carolina existed until we went on that tour. And it was an amazing show.
Yeah,
But yeah, we did play in
that's the one.
Jacksonville.
Yeah, I was like, was it with 200 stab wounds and Cannibal Corpse? But I was like, no, that's a different show because that happened like relatively at the same time. But I didn't mean to cut you off. But that's what it was, the Dying Fetus show. Body Snatcher, Dying Fetus, and you guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Vatican was there too.
It was Frozen Soul and Undeath.
Yes.
But that tour, we were expecting to get shit on by a majority of the audience, and like we know we can hold our own as far as bringing people to the show. We knew we'd have our fans there, but we expected the others, the people coming for the Dying Fetus, Frozen Soul, and Undeath, sound. We expected them to hate us. But every single night we'd get off stage, we'd go to merch, and we'd have people be like, I thought I was going to hate you guys. I've never liked you guys. I always had some bad taste in my mouth just hearing your band's name. And then I come and I watch you play, and I'm sold, completely sold now. You've got a fan now. I'm sorry for spending the last 10 years thinking you guys were pussy horse shit,
Yeah.
So like, I think, just from that experience, like I was told there's this embedded bias against deathcore. And I think sometimes it just takes experiencing it and like giving it a fair chance. And maybe because our band has refined our sound and we're not the same sound we were 10, 15 years ago. But yeah, it is interesting. I think deathcore gets the short end of the stick a lot, but at the same time, it's thriving so much now that either you're forced to acknowledge that it's legitimate or we're fine without you.
Yeah. I feel like it's just one of those newer, it was a newer, form of music in that time frame. And obviously a lot of people thought it was probably gimmicky. And so they just initially hated it because it was but again, it didn't help that MySpace, kind of helped blow that up too. And a lot of, it's like the get off my lawn kind of crew that's like fuck that MySpace crowd. But I mean, like obviously for us or for me, however, that was a big way of how I found like a lot of the bands I still hold near and dear to my heart. But I could see how like it started off with a negative vibe, but I had to persevere through that. And by negative vibe, I mean from the outside, not the internal fans of deathcore thinking it was negative or anything. We've been talking for a little bit. I'm gonna cut you loose here so you can have some Popeyes, and I know you've been wanting to hit that vape stick. So
this freaking it smells awesome right here. It's literally sitting right beneath my chair, and I'm going ravenous.
Yeah. But something I like to do, and it depends on your answer, depends on how much longer obviously this goes. So something I like to do is kind of like let the fans of not just your band, but of like heavy music in general kind of realize that there's not like a plethora of money to be had in this arena. Some bands, they're able to fully sustain themselves just being a band. And again, I'm not saying that you guys aren't. I don't know if you guys are or not. But if you aren't, what does Steven do outside of Chelsea Grin, not only to pay the bills, but pass his time, like hobby wise?
I run a studio in Portland, Oregon. So when I'm not touring, playing music, I'm usually helping artists write music. I do a lot of songwriting and production and engineering for people. And that was really like, we're fortunate that our band is able to sustain us pretty damn well. And I'm a single guy, like it's a lot easier for me than some others, in different circumstances, but it came out of a necessity to fill the time. When you tour like crazy, your brain gets accustomed to a certain pace. Every day I'm in a new city, I'm surrounded by 30 people that I know personally. I'm playing in front of hundreds of people, and then you come home and there's this immense slowdown, And so for me, it was like, well, I need to occupy my time. I need to do something other than wait for the next tour. So yeah, I've been running my studio. I started it a couple years ago, and it's been a godsend. You know, it's kept me sane, it's kept me creative, um, gets me out of the house, which nothing but work will get me out of the house at this point in my life. So I'm grateful to have it. Uh, you know, we all have some type of side hustle that just keeps us mentally healthy. You
Mhm.
know, if it was all CG all the time, then I imagine we would all be in shambles. We'd resent the situation. So yeah, it's kept me busy. It's helped. It's supplemented the income, you know, which is
Interesting. Yeah,
awesome.
that's the whole point. So you can continue making the art. That's why I bring that up because and you've touched a couple points that help people get into heavy music, but I stress supporting the bands that you like or see live so much because I think a lot of people think that like if you're a signed band, you're getting paid and you should just focus on making music and that's all your job is. But in reality, you know, a lot of bands, most bands, I don't want to say most bands, let's say a good chunk of bands come back from tour in the negative. Um, and
Mhm.
that's basically like where you're going to make your money for the most part sometimes is live shows and touring.
Yep.
So, you know, I try to like paint the reality for the individuals that's either a in a band or just a fan of that music. Supporting those bands in any monetary way is how you're going to continue the art that you enjoy being created by that band and by other bands, obviously. So, like, if you ever wonder what happened to the band that you never went to go see live or buy an album from, that's probably you probably answered your own question. If you don't have an album or a piece of merch from that band, then you it's pretty fucking self-explanatory what happened to them. They didn't get supported. So I think that supporting the bands when they come to town, as directly as possible. I say obviously like if you're signed to a label and you're buying an album, like the label does get a cut, this that, the other. So if a band has a Patreon or if a band plays live in your area, the merch sales, ticket sales go more so to that band. So I try to be a beacon for that to kind of let people know like, hey, no one's winning the lottery on the road. You gotta like if you enjoy this, you gotta come and show up or pay support somehow.
Yeah, you have to stimulate the musical economy if you want it not to crash. You know, it is really hard, especially when you're starting up, to break even. And you know, I do think the perception of being in a band, especially like everyone knows Beyonce, Taylor Swift, they all those artists, it's no question, they're thriving and
Yeah,
crushing it. Not a
exactly.
worry in the world, right? But if you're in a metal band, you are knowingly capping yourself to a certain degree, you know, within a very high probability of capping yourself to a certain degree of success. And so it's very much reliant on people supporting through means like you said, concert tickets, merchandise. Not every band has the luxury of keeping you know, much of their albums. A lot of bands have to recoup advances, like money advances, before they get paid anything from their albums, you know? So every bit that you throw into it is felt, you know, it's not easy. There are a lot of expenses, you know. It's not like creating music is creating something from nothing. It takes money and it
Yeah.
takes time, and you know, you sacrifice a lot of time to be in a band. So much time. It's hard to have a job when you're off tour for a lot of people, because what job wants to hire someone who's going to be gone every other month?
Right.
It's extremely difficult. A lot of people really struggle, and you know, I would say for my band, we've been around for 15 years, and it's not the kind of income you'd want to have a family on. You know, like it's not. We've been doing this for so damn long. And like I said, I'm really grateful that we are able to come home with money at all. It's it's not easy. And I really, you know, I see a lot of artists struggle very much, but I do see people buying merch more and more.
Of course,
Uh,
I think the younger generation really does kind of do that really well. And that's I was going
yeah.
to lead into that saying like our generation, whatever that is, like there was only another generation prior to us, basically. So like we were the second generation dealing with like hardcore metal, like that as we kind of know it. I feel like now another 20 years has gone by. This generation is more applicable to come out of the pocket. And that's, but again, I still homer that, drill at home because like, if that stops or whatever, like, because like you said, there's a finite amount of people that, let's say you're the best metal band in all of the world. There's a finite amount of people that you could touch that even will like metal, right? So
Right.
that's metal. Like Metallica has a finite amount of people that they can touch. It's a little bit larger than the average metal band because they are a big mainstream band, but still, like every person wearing a Metallica shirt, we already know, doesn't listen to like Metallica. So they're a pop culture reference, but they all also have a finite number of individuals that they can touch. To where if you go down to like another level of band, Five Finger Death Punch or whatever, they have a fucking infinite level. So get down to the nitty gritty of like the weirdest of weirdest music that you listen to. There's only like a fucking small finite amount of people that really even fuck with that. So it is so, like when you see bands just keep going, and when you have bands like Every Time I Die, even though they're a different genre altogether, but when you see bands like that hanging up, it's like, fuck, dude, you guys lasted so long and it's so hard. You know what I mean? It's so hard. So when you see a band do it, it's really like kudos, man, because especially like the more weird avant-garde stuff, that has a less of a pool of audience to like pull from. It's like kudos to those people and kudos for having the love and passion and drive to do that, So
Yeah, I think anyone who is doing what we do is a passionate person. I mean, there are people I guess I wouldn't say that about who are just here for the fun, right? But I think it takes a lot of passion to eat so much shit. You got to really like shit to eat this much shit. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, I love it.
Um,
I eat shit every day, unfortunately, but
yeah, it's the thing. It ain't easy, you know. I think that the perception of it can be really skewed. But like you said, this newer generation merch sales for a lot of bands, a lot of my friends' bands, even like opening bands. I've heard of bands opening tours and doing as much merch as we might do in a show. And it just goes to show that like there is this support and this understanding coming back in. I would just encourage people to continue that. Go to the concerts, you know, that's a huge part of it. Even if you can't help them out financially, you know, if you can't afford to buy a ticket, every person that goes to a show just helps secure a better show for the band the next time they come through. um so any means of support, even just like sharing music, you know, the more ears that hear, the more ears that your music hits, the more support you're gaining, the more you can sustain this job. And that goes for financially, emotionally, professionally, so many things. The more you stimulate this economy, the more we all benefit. And I'm not just talking about the artists. It's like the more everybody in this circle can benefit. So
I agree wholeheartedly. Steve, I
yes,
won't keep you this much longer on this lovely Friday night. Your chicken sandwiches or chicken has been getting
I got
cold long enough.
I got the tenders.
Good choice. I'm actually going to go get some boneless wings here. I've decided. Uh,
Good call,
it's,
dude.
it's getting late here on a Friday night. Why not? I actually I am is playing like right down the
Oh,
street,
really?
so I'm trying to hopefully catch that if I didn't miss them playing. But yeah, they're playing down the street, so I'm gonna try to catch that out. But
Sick.
it was great having you on, man. Congratulations on the release. You just released it today. This podcast comes out in a number of weeks. I'll be in touch with you and stuff like that as to when it comes out. But yeah, congratulations on that. Hopefully, we'll be posting some Billboard stuff. We've seen a lot of Billboard, bands from our world hop on Billboard lately. Like Goat Whore was on there, Polyphia was just on there. A number of
Yeah.
bands have shown up on there recently. So hopefully, we'll be posting some accolades of you guys in the next week or two here. Maybe
Hope so.
hopefully Ryan Downey gets us that information.
Yeah,
But
right.
God, there was one thing I was going to leave off with you. Oh yes, uh, what flavor is the vape, Stephen?
Red mojito, and I don't like it.
Would you say it
This
was
this this freaking bastard's got me wanting to quit altogether.
Oh, nice. Well, hey, there you go. That's good. All right. Well, we'll leave it on that note. If you if you're attending a show, That's where you get the whole vibe. That's where you feel the music. It's if you don't like it when you're listening to it on just audio, it's probably because you're listening on shitty speakers anyway. But if you go to a show, by all means, you'll definitely get it. If you already are a fan, bring a normal friend to the show.
Yeah.
Ruin their world,
Yeah.
get them down the rabbit hole, and then because it's a whole different ball game. You can bring a completely person that's clueless to it. They'll see the whole atmosphere and they'll get intrigued and they'll just go down that rabbit hole. So let's grow
Happens a
this.
lot.
Yeah, let's grow this scene together. That way, I can touch more people with Lambgoat. As I want to get as big as Metallica. I want everyone to be
Yeah.
as big as Metallica.
Yeah,
So
that's the goal for everybody, right?
yeah. So final thoughts, Steven. Send us out with some cool final thoughts.
Well, I don't know how cool they are. We just have a lot coming up, man. I mean, if you like Chelsea Grin, then you're in luck. We've got so much material. We're touring a ton. We'll be in Europe at the end of November, this month. We're planning a lot of headlining. Australia in January with Thy Art Is Murder. Our second of 2 new albums comes out March 17th. Our new one, Suffer in Hell, the first, is out. So by the time you're hearing this, hopefully you've heard it. Give it a chance. I just appreciate people listening and support artists, beyond even just us. If you see an artist you like, just show them some love because everybody deserves love.
Even a retweet or a share. Retweet or share goes a long way.
Exactly.
And Steve, I think we'll see you in Central Florida and then early next year for that Central Florida Metal Festival, or
we just did the Central Florida Metal Fest.
That's right. I was thinking of August Burns Reds coming.
September.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the August Burns Red thing coming up in February, but what you're not a part of. But you were a part of the Central Florida Metal Fest, which I did not attend. But yes, okay.
We will be through everywhere, probably in the world at some point in 2023. So we'll see you there.
We're on the lookout for you. All right, man. Well, have a great Friday, and I'll leave you to it.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
No problem, man. Take it easy.